Alright, so we're going to be animating this fish here. Gorgeous fish. Still his eyes. I'll give them his eyes a little bit. You can see that he's wagging his tail as he swims through the water. And you can see how he's kind of conforming to his path and kind of wiggling around. And right there, except for right there at the end, it looks great. Right there at the end, there's a little glitch right here where the fish's mouth looks kind of funny. Alright, but everything else looks good up until that point. Okay? Alright, so you're going to use this fish startup file, and he'll have eye color when you get the file. And we have to look at this as, how does the fish move, and what do we want to do with this thing? Now, we're not going to do this in ultra realistic movement. We're going to do this in a couple different ways. One way, we're going to create this little loop of, him wagging his fin back here and these flippers kind of wiggling as well. Okay, so let's go and start this. Now you see it's a pretty dense model. And it's dense for a reason because of how many deformations we're having on this thing. So I'm just going to grab some vertices back here, and I'm just going to hit Shift greater than to kind of go up the chain until I get to the tail area, or the end of the tail, like that. And I'm going to go to Create Deformers, Nonlinear, Bend. And I've talked about the bend tool before. So we kind of have an understanding of what it already does. So I'm just rotating it, and I'm just going to scale it up. Push this back to that area where I had it set up as my boundary. And then I'm going to turn off the low bound. So we only get the bending happening in one direction. Just like the band. There we go. Okay, so now if I click on curvature and I middle mouse button drag, you can see how I'm getting just that tail to flip and flop left and right. That's what we want. Okay, so now I'm going to do the same thing for some of these other areas here. So I'm just going to grab the vertices here. And Shift greater than up the chain. Oops. I had 1 point selected there, so I Shift greater than now, it should be good. Okay. So now that's there. So then we're going to go create another bend. And you'll see that it automatically kind of puts it in the same area, which is convenient. We just have to get it lined up with the direction of the surface, which isn't terribly too difficult. Again, we'll take our low bound off, check the curvature. This one's not going to move as much, just a little bit, a wiggle like that. Good. Okay. Now we'll do the same thing on this side. Low bound off. Curvature, good. Nice flippy floppy. Alright, cool. Now I could do the same thing for these underside ones. Let me go to my front view. Or actually I'll go to the side view. It'll be easier to see. There we go. And I'm going to use a lasso. I use a lasso too often in Maya, but they have a lasso tool. I can marquee basically at an angle, then use my Shift greater than to go up the chain. There we go. And in this case, I'm going to use a different deformer. I'm going to use a sine wave, and I'm going to rotate it. We'll add a little amplitude. Go kind of like that is what I want. rotate it. Add a little drop off in there as well. I'm trying to find a good angle that I can use this without it affecting the top of it too much. Alright, that'll probably be sufficient. If it looks funky, we can always take it off. Oops, I have it upside down, that's why it's acting funny. There we go, that's what I wanted to do. Alright, so I have drop off on here. I also took the low bound off. And if you look at this, I have the major movement right here and the least amount of movement at the top. That's what I wanted to do. Cool. Alright, so reset that. Get this thing centered better. And I'm just going to reset my rotates. There we go, already set. Good. Alright. Let's double check it again. Yep, that's what I wanted. Okay. Wavelength. Make the wavelength 5. That way I have kind of like more of a sway to it. Okay. Do the same thing with this guy back here. There we go. So if I grab some that are way up here, I don't care. I just want to make sure that I have most of the, or all the ones on the tail area selected. So another sine wave. Let's go and add our amplitude. Oops, 0.1. We'll add the drop off, take the low bound off. Just a matter of getting it lined up and then testing it out. There we go. And I could even use that for the tail too, but I just like the way that, you know, I have a little bit more control of the tail. There we go, it's nice. And then we'll add that to the top here. And see, I'm just kind of grabbing chunks of this, because sometimes when you use the shift greater than, it does a pretty good job of kind of filtering out any of those inconsistencies and grabbing the stuff that we need. In that case, it did it pretty much perfectly. Alright, we'll see if the sine wave is going to work in this one. Low bound off, a little bit of amplitude, some drop off. I have to flip it around upside down this time. I have to scale it so that it fits accordingly. There you go. Alright, cool. So just find the right spot for that one. Again, I'll make the wavelength a little bit bigger so we get more bigger waves. Oh, in that case, I don't want it to be bigger. I like that too. There we go. Perfect. Okay. So now we have all these, if I go to the outliner, I have all these bend and sign handles. We don't want to delete the history on the fish because that will get rid of all those. And I'm going to take these eyes here, shift click the fish, and just parent them to the fish. So just hit P to parent them. Okay, so now what I need to do is take all of these, shift click the fish, and parent them to the fish as well. So now when I grab the fish, he's going to move with all of his controls. If they weren't parented and I just grab the fish, he moves away from his handles and then they stop working. Okay, so these handles have to be parented to the fish. Okay, so now as the fish moves, we can set these things up to move as well. So I'm going to go and create a shape. So I'm just going to create, let's say, torus. Okay, and this is going to be our controlling object, but obviously we don't want a torus there, so I'm going to go to the attribute editor, go to object display, drawing overrides, and I'm going to enable overrides on here and just say that I just want shading turned off, texturing turned off. The color, I can make it, another color here, like green, so that when I'm clicked off, there it is. I also want to go to render stats and turn off all of these things. I don't want to render at all. And I can come over to my polytorus options, and I can reduce the amount of divisions on there. So we just have this thing that looks like, a little cage that our fish would animate around. Okay, or I could take, some of these divisions down even further. Not that one. Like that. Okay, or I can shape it however I want. I can actually go in here and just delete pieces of this. Okay, now I'm doing it to make it a little more obvious, but you can do it to whatever shape you want. And a lot of rigs you'll see, they have different kinds of shapes and stuff that they've used to create, the look of that control. Okay, so I'm going to take the control, click the fishy, hit P to parent the control. Alright, so there we go. So now we have this like control out here. Now if we hit the render button, we're not going to see that control when it renders. There you go, we see the fish. If I go to white alpha channel, there's no control there. Okay, and that's what we want. Okay, just something for us to click on to add our controls to. So now we can go to delete the history on the control, freeze the transforms on the control. Everything's reset. Fish control. I'm never going to translate, rotate, or scale this thing. It's kind of like set where I want it right now. So I'm going to right click and say lock and hide selected. Okay. And then I'm going to grab this. I don't need the visibility either. And I'm going to go to modify, add attributes. And I'm going to say fish. I don't need to say fish, but tail wag. Okay, I'm going to leave my mins and maxes off just because I may want to play with those later, and hit add. I'm going to go to, let's see what else we have. We have each side of his fin here. Let's say left fin, and just hit add. Right fin, hit add. Dorsal fin, which is that one up top, we'll add that. And then we'll add, I think they're called pectoral fins. And this one back here is called the anal fin, I believe. There we go. Okay, so now we have controls for each one of his fins that we can then tie into these things here. Okay, so I don't have to keep going to these and click on them and adjust it. On this guy, I know that when I animate it, it's going to be curvature that I play with. Everything else should be set. So now we need to go into here and just link those things up. So I'm going to use the expression editor. So we're going to say, let's go to the outliner also, open this up. That way I can see what these are. And before I even do expressions, let me go name these. So this one here is going to be left fin, right fin. Pectoral sign. Oops. Yeah, let me add that in there too, underscore bend. That way I know what kind it is also, so I know what attributes I should be calling. There we go. Okay, so tail underscore bend dot curvature equals fish control dot, I'll retype it because I clicked off of it. Tail bend underscore curvature equals fish control dot tail underscore wag. I'll probably get an error. I did, okay, because it says the attribute's missing. And this is an important thing to note, is that even though we have this thing called tail bend, here's curvature. You'll see that curvature is under tail underscore bend shape. And this is yellowed out. I actually have to go to bend 1, and that's where the curvature is for this thing. Okay? So even if I hit Control A, here's the tail bend shape. This is just like a handle. This bend is the actual thing that's doing it. So I'm writing expressions for bend 1. I'm going to say bend underscore tail, and then bend 2, which would be left fin, and then most likely bend 3 is going to be the right fin, and then the sine wave here, oops, is going to be his pectoral, oops, and sine 2 come on. Sine 3 is going to be his dorsal. Sine 2 is, oops, anal fin. There we go. Okay. So as we write expressions, it's also important that we know what attributes we're writing attributes for. Okay. So, and you see I click on the fish control and then all those things go away. Well, it's kind of annoying. So let me click on the fish. So it pops open all of these things here. I'm going to go to my expression editor and say object filter DAG objects, that's what I wanted. And you'll see how it lists all the stuff that's inside here. So that as I grab fish or fish shape or any of these other things, I actually want the fish control. There it is. And now I get these without loading this in here. Okay. So now I can say fish control, oops, no, sorry, not fish control. I can say sine underscore dorsal dot offset equals fish control dot dorsal fin. create. And now that works. Okay, so I can see what the things are here and see what the things are here without having to mess around too much. So I'm just going to go through the list and punch these in. So the next one is going to be assign anal offset equals fish control dot anal fin. I'm putting a semicolon at the end of this. I'm hitting edit each time. And sign underscore pectoral dot offset equals fish control dot pectoral fins. And then I'm doing the next one, which is bend underscore right fin dot curvature. That's what the bend is. Equals fish control dot right fin. And I can just copy this for the next one and just change rights to lefts. As long as I've named them the same way. So it makes things easier. And this one will be tail wag dot curvature equals fish control and it will be tail wag dot curvature. We bend tail. Bend tail. Okay, hit edit. I did get an error. So I'll hit the script editor. It'll say fish control dot tail or whale underscore wag. It doesn't exist. Because I spelled that wrong. And bend underscore tail dot curvature is also wrong. So I'm going to Control A, Control C to copy it and open the attribute editor. And just make sure bend tail, this is a lowercase t. There we go. Okay. So it's always something that you just have to make sure that all your typing is correct. So let me copy and paste this to WordPad. And I will change my font if I can figure out how to do that. Or I'll just do that so you can see the dorsal offset for the sine wave is equal to dorsal fin. The anal offset is equal to the anal fin. The pectoral offset equals the pectoral fin, and so on and so forth. Okay, so if you need to pause the video, voila. Okay, so now if I minimize this, now I have one spot that I can just grab this, and I can adjust this here. Okay, now here's like a gimme kind of thing, is that I'm always going to want this thing just to do this. For the entire animation, I just want it to do that. Back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. I don't want to keyframe this thing going back and forth. Okay, left fin, same kind of thing. Just this is going to be just kind of like a wave back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. Same thing with right fin. My dorsal fin, this one is going to automatically go back and forth because this one's an offset. Okay, this one isn't a bend, which is going one way and then going the other way. This is an offset, so it's automatically going to offset these kinds of things. So one thing I can do is I can add some extra controls in here. Okay, so these ones here, these are fine. All my sine waves work great. My bends, however, don't. So what I can do is I'm going to put in this expression. Okay, so I'm going to say that the curvature is going to equal the sine of time times 2. Okay, so I'm just going to copy this, paste it, edit it, set this aside, and now as I rewind and hit play, add some more frames here, you'll see that this is gradually going to offset in both directions. Okay, and these guys down here are doing the same kind of thing. So what I'm going to do is just make this number bigger. This 2 is just way too small. So let's make it 20. That's probably going to be a lot, but we'll see. So I paste it in there, I edit it. And now you can see that we're getting some nice movement. It's a little bit slow, but we can speed that up. Okay. When you do something like this is basically creating a sine wave, just like we did up here. These are creating sine waves also. So this is creating a sine wave, and it's linking it to the time. So as time goes by, it's going to go a certain speed. So if I make this frame, copy it, we paste it, I edit it, we rewind it, I hit play again, you'll see that now this is moving a lot quicker. Okay, on frame it's reading frame 1, 1, frame 2, 2, frame 3, 3, and so on. With time, it has to get to, in this case, if I go to my animation preferences, we're on 24 frames per second, which we should be at 30. There we go. When we get to 30 and time, it's reading it as 1. Okay, so the larger the increase in this, the more it's going to offset. Okay, now if I just did the sine of 5, it's just going to stay whatever the sine, the mathematical formula, or the mathematical calculation of whatever the sine of 5 is. The reason we're using something like frame or time is because it's constantly changing. It's constantly getting bigger and bigger, and so it's constantly going to keep moving. All right. So I can do things like, say, sine of frame divided by 10, divided by 10, divided by 10. So now we'll go a third slower. Oops. Okay, now it's also looking pretty static inside here. So what I can do is give these things their individual offsets. Okay, so maybe I give one, one's going to go, say the right fin's going to go 8, the left fin's going to go, let's say -8, and then the tail is going to go 5. And the tail goes a little bit quicker. I'll edit these. I'll paste them. And now you can see how now they're kind of all offsetting on their own, but still kind of maintaining their movement that they should. Okay. The other thing I can do is also add in here, because right now we're not using our controller at all. We have no control over how this moves. So what I can do though is I can take this number, whatever number is coming out of here, and I can multiply it by that attribute. What do I mean by that? Well, let's say I take this thing and I put it in parentheses. And I say, figure out what this is. Okay, whatever your math formula is for this, figure that out. And then let's just take that and multiply it times fish control dot tail underscore wag. Okay, so I'll just copy that. Paste it. And now I will play. Oops, I put it into the wrong one. That's why it's working. Right fin. I'm just going to do it to the same thing to the rest of these, just so you can see them all kind of work together. All right, there we go. So now I hit play and you see that nothing happens, okay? And the reason that nothing's happening is because these are all set to 0. 0 times anything is 0. So if I set the tail wag to 1, you can see now he's moving like that. If I set this to 5, he's moving like that. So as I start to play with these, I can really kind of control his movement. Okay, so I still have some control over this, and the same thing for his other fins. And I start to play with these guys and get just more control over them. That's what we want. Okay. These things here, I can do the same thing. Okay. So for these guys, what I'm going to do is just set them to frame. Oops. Not frame. I'll set to time. Frame will probably go too fast. Time times whatever our control is. Time times. Time times. Okay, so right now the other guys aren't moving at all. I just give them a little bit of value here. And now you can see how everything's kind of moving at this moment. You see those? Well, those guys are kind of moving a little bit slow. Let's kick up the beat a little bit. Okay, so now we've basically animated our fish being able to move around. That's what we want. Okay, so now this is part of the fun of this, is that we've created this little control and it does all this work and it's great. Let's save this as FishRigging 01. So now I need to take this guy, I need to put him on a path and make him go swim along the path. So I'm going to go to the side view. I'm going to create a curve, a CV curve tool. I'm not doing any like 90-degree angles here, just like the snake. I want it to be nice and smooth. Okay, so there he is. Now we're not going to put bones in him, we're going to do something different. So I'm going to take him, okay, just the fish itself, click the curve. I'm going to put him on a motion path, attached to motion path option box. Start and end, let's say 300 frames, that's 10 seconds. This fish swims kind of slow. His front axis is Z, his up axis is Y, attach. Okay, and as I hit play, if I realized he was going backwards or something, I could find the motion path, and I could play with the inverse of the up. So now he's upside down. Inverse of the front, so now he's swimming backwards, or I could swap any of these other parameters. Oops. So now I hit play, and you'll see that our fish is going to go along the path, while all these other things are kind of moving along. So as he's like flipping and flopping his tail, he's also swimming. Okay, and this is pretty quick. So let me take this, I'm going to right click on the U value for the motion path, go to the top button, and just set this to be like 600. That way it goes a bit slower. I want it to look like a race. I want it to look like he's actually swimming. Okay. Now it doesn't really look very realistic because as he gets into these things, it looks like a solid, hard-shelled fish kind of doing that. And fish have, you know, they're pretty flexible. So he'd be kind of bending along as he was doing all this stuff. So I'm going to grab the fish and go to animate motion paths, flow path object. And there's two things we can do here. One, we can put a lattice around the object. Okay, so leave the settings as they are, hit flow effect, and we create this box around our fish. So now if we rewind this and we hit play, what's going to happen is as the fish gets to these areas, that box is going to kind of deform and get our fish to swim nicely along that area. At the same time, all his other controls are still working. So he's still flipping and flopping his tail. Okay. So that's one way that we can do that, is by doing that. The other thing we can do is, if I go back to, I hit undo, and go back to my motion paths flow path object, we can do a curve shape. So on here, if I just did 5, that's not going to be enough. I know we need like 60 or so. Hit flow, and now there's a curve that the fish is going to swim along. And as I rewind this and hit play, I'll see that the fish is swimming along it. And you actually get this nice little like rippling effect on the fish as it goes. Okay, it might be too strong, and I might need to increase the divisions on there. But we'll see that everything is still working. His fins are moving and he's swimming along merrily. I can go grab vertices on this path and just kind of tweak it. I have to be careful I don't bunch too many points into one area, because then the lattice gets kind of congested. So I have to make sure I kind of keep these evenly spaced. Really gotta zoom out so I can adjust this. I'll give it a little more height in some of these areas, so we can really see this fish kind of deform as it goes along. And here's a little trick too. I want to like basically follow the fish, okay, without having to follow the fish. So I'm going to go to create a new camera, find the fish. Where is he? There he is. Come on. All right, and I'm just kind of lining myself up to the fish at a good angle, let's say like that. So I'm going to go to my outliner. I'm going to grab my perspective and just middle drop it into fish. So now, as I rewind and hit play, you'll see that I'm going to follow the fish around. Okay, and you can see where he's still wiggling his tails and fins and all that stuff. But you can see there's also probably a little bit, not enough divisions in here, and we're getting some funky extra wiggliness to every time he hits one of those boxes, his face kind of like drips down. Okay, but it does create a nice little look to him as we're doing it. So I can grab this box. Here's how easy it is to get rid of this. Just grab the lattice in its base and just delete it. Okay, fish goes back to the path. Everything's happy. We can just grab the fish, go to the motion path, not the motion path. Go to flow path object. Add some more divisions, like maybe 200. Okay, and then flow. There we go. And then go back to our perspective camera. And now we don't have that little issue. And he's deforming and kind of, stretching out and fitting to the shape of this. And we could even have created one for his head that allowed us to kind of wiggle his head around as well. Okay. So now we've created this really cool rig for this fish, and we've kind of animated him swimming along, and it looks really cool. Now the benefits of using one over the other is we can adjust these things afterwards. Okay, so like this lattice here, just for fun, let's say that alright, so I set up this scene here where I have my fish, a new curve. Just delete the old curve, delete the old lattices. We're back to just having fish, curve, and a plane. I need the fish to get in this hole. He obviously cannot fit in the hole. So if I grab the fish, I go to my flow path objects. I set it to be a curve one, low divisions. I can grab these lattice points and scale them down. or I can move them. And then I can just add some transitional effects here and here and maybe even here and here. There we go. Okay. So then as the fish comes through, you can see how comically cartoony like he kind of shrinks down and stretches and then pops out the other side. Okay, and all of his controls go with him. Everything's working the exact way that it should be working. You see his eyes are squishing down, his fins are squishing down, everything's still squishing down. And then he just pops back out and then he's back to normal. Okay, so that's what you would use the path one for. Let me go to the outliner, delete these. For the assignment, I just want you to just put him on a path. You know, a nice little curvy path. It doesn't have to be anything crazy. Like I said, don't try to squish the points too close together, and don't try to create anything that's too sharp in movement. Otherwise, you'll get some funky results. Okay. And then you can do whichever one works out best. So in this case, I'll most likely go with the object one. Set this to maybe like 8. I'll even do 5 and 5 going the other way. Okay, now it's obviously a big mess of points here, but I don't need to see that big mess of points. And why it did that little jumpy thing, I don't know. Let me check this thing out here. Let me go to the graph editor. Click on this motion path. We'll set it to linear. That's odd. Okay, now if this box is too big, which it obviously is, I can go to the outliner. I can grab the FFD1 lattice, the FF1D base, and my base is way over there. That's where I created this originally. Let me delete this again and remake it real quick. There we go. And I can scale these down. And by scaling these down together, basically what area is of the fish is going to be affected. Okay, so I just want to make sure I scale it big enough and narrow enough that it affects the entire fish. There we go. Okay. So I can always hide these and then hit play. And then I have a nice little fish animation. And then in another video, the next video, I'll show you how we can add, multiple fish to the scene without kind of bogging it down. We can have like one main starfish, and then we can have several fish that are kind of like the background fish. So we'll save this scene as 02, and then we'll stop it there and then pick it up with the next video.